Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my channel? Thank you so much. My husband once told my son he needed to earn love in front of his whole family. He ripped a toy right out of my boys' hands and they laughed like it was some kind of lesson. I sat there frozen, my heart breaking. But just when I thought I would have to swallow my anger and take it, my son turned to me, nodded calmly, and said, "Mom, should I show them what we recorded last night?" And in that moment, everything changed. The night before it all happened, everything felt almost normal. It was a Friday evening and the living room buzzed with the low hum of conversation. Travis's parents, Patricia and Douglas, had come over for dinner, something that always made my stomach twist just a little. The tension wasn't new, it was just one of those heavy things that hung in the background, unspoken but sharp enough to feel. Still, I tried. I always tried. I lit a few candles, cooked Travis's favorite roast chicken with rosemary, and even let Mason pick out a dessert at the grocery store earlier that afternoon. He had chosen a little chocolate cake with colorful sprinkles. I remember the way he bounced on the balls of his feet when he spotted it, the way his eyes lit up when I said yes. Small moments like that made everything else worth it. We had picked up a small toy truck too, something Mason had been asking about for weeks. It wasn't expensive, just a bright red truck with big wheels and flashing lights. When he opened the bag at home and realized it was for him, he hugged the box tight against his chest like it was the most precious thing in the world. "Maybe Daddy will give it to me tonight," Mason asked hopefully. I hesitated but nodded. "Maybe, sweetheart." It was safer that way. Let Travis be the hero. Let him feel like the good guy. Sometimes small gestures help smooth the cracks we all tried not to notice. Dinner was tense as always. Patricia made her usual jabs, subtle but sharp. "The house looks cozy," she said, surveying our modest home with a tight smile. Douglas grunted in agreement, fiddling with the salt shaker like it was the most interesting thing in the room. I kept my head down, smiling where I needed to, laughing politely at things that weren't funny. Mason stayed close to me, sensing the undercurrents in a way only children can. After dessert, Travis pulled Mason onto his lap, handed him the shiny red truck, and said with a chuckle, "Here you go, buddy." Mason's face lit up like Christmas morning. He threw his arms around Travis's neck in an eager hug, clutching the toy with pure, unfiltered joy. For a fleeting second, something warm bloomed in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, tonight would be different. But the moment didn't last. Later, as the adults sipped coffee and Mason played on the carpet with his truck, Patricia leaned over and muttered something into Travis's ear. He laughed, that hollow, low laugh he used when he wanted to seem in control. "Don't spoil him," she said a little louder this time, her voice slicing through. "He needs to earn things. Earn love. Otherwise, he'll turn out soft like a mama's boy." Douglas chuckled, nodding as if she had said something profound. I froze. My stomach knotted. I saw Travis's hand tighten slightly around his coffee cup. Then, almost casually, he stood up, walked over to Mason, and yanked the toy truck right out of his hands. Mason looked up, stunned. "You don't just get things because you're cute," Travis said, smiling coldly. "You earn them by being strong." "Got it." Patricia and Douglas laughed, actual full laughter, like it was a good joke, like it was teaching Mason something important. I didn't laugh. I couldn't even breathe properly. I looked at Mason, his small hand still frozen in the air where the truck had been a second ago, his big brown eyes blinking rapidly as if trying to understand what he had done wrong. The room buzzed with adult voices, casual and careless, while Mason's heart quietly cracked right in front of me. I reached for his hand under the table, squeezing it, anchoring him even as my own world tilted. Inside, I was a storm, rage, shame, helplessness. But outside, I stayed calm for him. And that's when Mason, still holding my hand, leaned closer and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Mom, should I show them what we recorded last night?" I turned to him, startled, my mind racing. The recording, I had forgotten all about it. The night before, while cleaning up after dinner, I had left my phone recording on accident. It captured every casual cruelty, every mocking word they thought Mason was too young to understand. I squeezed his hand back, heart pounding. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The air in the living room turned heavy, like someone had pulled all the warmth out and left only this brittle, sharp tension behind. Mason sat beside me, his little fingers still curled tightly around mine. His new truck lay abandoned on the coffee table, where Travis had tossed it without a second thought, as if it were a piece of trash instead of the treasure Mason had believed it was just moments before. I could feel every set of eyes in the room pressing down on us. Patricia's smug satisfaction, Douglas's silent approval, Travis's rigid pride. It was like they were daring me to say something, to make a scene, to prove once again that I was too emotional, too soft, too much. But it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Mason, my sweet, kind-hearted boy who deserved better than to learn that love was something to be fought for or snatched away when he didn't perform well enough. I could see him shrinking, folding in on himself the way kids do when they think they've disappointed the people they love most. And that's when I realized if I stayed silent now, I would be teaching him the wrong lesson. I would be teaching him that the people who hurt you the most get to walk away without consequence, that you have to swallow your pain to keep the peace, that love is conditional, something you can lose. Moment you're not good enough. And I couldn't do that to him. I wouldn't. Mason tugged gently at my sleeve, tilting his head toward the phone I had left charging by the window. Mom, he whispered again, a little louder this time. Should I show them what we recorded last night? I could feel Travis stiffen across the room. Patricia's smirk faded slightly. The mood shifted from amusement to suspicion, prickling under the surface. What's he talking about? Travis asked, forcing a chuckle that didn't quite reach his eyes. I swallowed hard, heart thundering in my chest. You know, I said calmly, lifting my gaze to meet Travis's, that little conversation you had with your parents after dinner last night, the one where you thought Mason was asleep. Travis's face darkened. Patricia sat up straighter, adjusting the collar of her sweater. Douglas pretended to check his watch, suddenly very interested in the time. Mason slid off the couch and crossed the room, picking up my phone with a confidence that made my heart swell with pride and sorrow at the same time. He knew he had heard it all and he wasn't going to let them pretend anymore. Mason! Travis barked, his voice sharp. Give that to me. But Mason just looked at him, really looked at him, and didn't move. Mom said I could, he said simply. I nodded once, giving him permission in the quiet way only a mother and child can understand. Mason tapped the screen and the recording started to play. At first, there was just the clinking of dishes and chairs scraping against the floor. Then came the voices, clear and undeniable. Patricia's laugh, sharp and cutting. You're spoiling him, Travis. He's weak. She's raising a little princess. Then Travis's voice, thick with disdain. She's making him soft. The world's going to chew him up. I'm not bailing him out when he falls apart. I watched their faces tighten as their own words filled the room. The arrogance drained from Patricia's expression. Douglas stared down at the floor. Travis shifted uncomfortably, crossing his arms over his chest like a shield. When the recording ended, there was no laughter, no smirking, just silence. Mason looked up at me, his eyes shining not with tears but with something stronger, something I hadn't seen in him before. Courage. Real, raw, unshakable courage. And in that moment, I knew we had reached a line that could never be uncrossed. I wasn't going to protect their feelings at the expense of my son's spirit. Not anymore. I wrapped my arm around Mason's shoulders and pulled him close, feeling his small heart hammering against mine. You don't have to fight for love, baby, I whispered into his hair. You already have it, always. He nodded against me, believing it. And for the first time that night, I felt something rise in me that was bigger than fear. It was strength. It was the beginning of something new. And I wasn't going to let them steal it from us. Not ever again. The room sat in stunned, uncomfortable silence. The only sounds were the faint ticking of the clock above the fireplace and Mason's soft breathing against my side. Travis stood stiffly by the coffee table, arms crossed so tightly his knuckles turned white. His parents shifted in their seats, each of them looking everywhere but at me or Mason. They weren't used to being called out, certainly not by a 7-year-old with a backbone stronger than they ever expected. I could feel the moment hanging there teetering. There was still time to back down, to smooth it over with a fake smile, a rushed apology to pretend this hadn't happened. That was the Carter way, ignore it, bury it, pretend everything was fine. But I wasn't a Carter and Mason deserved better. So I made a decision, not in anger but in absolute unwavering clarity. I stood up, still holding Mason's hand. I faced Travis fully, my voice steady but unmistakably firm. We are not doing this anymore, I said quietly. We are not raising our son to believe he has to earn love or approval. He is enough exactly as he is. Travis's jaw clenched. You're making him weak, he snapped. The world's not going to hand him trophies for breathing, Lena. I could hear Patricia muttering under her breath, something about spoiling and soft boys who can't handle real life. But I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I didn't plead for understanding. Not this time. Instead, I dropped to one knee so I was eye level with Mason. I brushed the hair from his forehead and looked him squarely in the eyes, making sure my words would etch themselves into his heart forever. You don't have to be anything other than yourself to be worthy of love, Mason, I said. You don't have to be tougher. You don't have to be colder. You just have to be you. His little face crumpled, but not from sadness, from relief. From knowing that someone was standing up for him with him. He threw his arms around my neck and squeezed with all the strength his small body could muster. Behind me, I heard Travis scoff. Unbelievable, he muttered. I turned then, standing tall again, but this time holding Mason's hand even tighter. You can believe whatever you want, Travis, I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the tension. But you won't teach my son that cruelty is strength. You won't teach him that love is a prize he has to win. For a moment, Travis looked like he might argue, but something in my face must have stopped him. Or maybe, just maybe, he realized he was already losing. I bent down, picked up the toy truck from the coffee table, and placed it back into Mason's arms. This belongs to you, honey, I said, and it always did. Mason clutched it to his chest, his eyes shining. I turned to Travis's parents then, feeling no fear, no shame. You laughed tonight because you thought hurting a child made you strong, I said, my voice unwavering. But it doesn't. It just shows how small your love really is. Patricia's mouth opened as if to protest, but no sound came out. Douglas shifted uncomfortably in his chair, suddenly finding the floor fascinating. I didn't wait for a response. Without another word, I guided Mason toward the front door. His little fingers slipped easily into mine, trusting me completely. As we reached the doorway, Mason glanced back once, not with anger or bitterness, but with a quiet kind of victory shining in his eyes. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real, and it was enough. When we stepped outside, the cool evening air wrapped around us like a balm. Mason looked up at the stars just starting to peek through the sky and grinned. Mom, he said softly, squeezing my hand, we're the strong ones, right? Tears prickled at the corners of my eyes, but I smiled through them. The strongest, I said, because true strength isn't in cruelty. It's in kindness that doesn't bend. It's in love that doesn't disappear the moment it's tested. And that night, we didn't just walk away from a toxic living room. We walked towards something better. A future where Mason would never have to doubt his own worth again. Not if I had anything to say about it. The door clicked shut behind us, and the moment it did, it felt like a heavy chain had slipped off my shoulders. The cool night air kissed our skin as Mason and I stood silently on the porch for a moment, just breathing it in. For the first time in a long time, I realized we weren't leaving empty-handed. We were leaving with something far more important than anyone inside that house could understand. We were leaving with our dignity intact. Mason clutched his red toy truck to his chest like it was a trophy. In a way, it was, not because it was expensive or flashy, but because it was a reminder that he mattered, that he was seen, that love was not something to be won or snatched away, but something he carried inside him simply because he existed. As we stepped down the porch steps toward the driveway, the porch light cast long shadows behind us. I glanced down at Mason, his face tilted up toward the stars, a small satisfied smile playing on his lips. I could see it then, not just the boy he was, but the man he would one day become. A man who would know his own worth. A man who wouldn't accept love with strings attached. A man who would be strong in the ways that mattered, kind, compassionate, resilient. As we reached the car, Mason turned to me and said in that small but sure voice of his, Mom, we don't have to go back there anymore, right? I knelt down in front of him so we were eye to eye, placing my hands gently on his small shoulders. No, sweetheart, I said, we don't have to go back. His whole body relaxed. It was like I could physically see the tension melt away from him, a boy who had been carrying the heavy weight of grown-up disappointment for far too long. He deserved better, and he would have it starting now. I opened the car door and helped him climb into his seat, making sure his toy truck was tucked safely beside him. As I buckled him in, he grinned up at me and said, Can we go get ice cream? I laughed. Real laugh, the kind I hadn't felt bubbling up inside me in months. Absolutely, I said. Double scoops? Whatever you want. As we pulled out of the driveway, I caught one last glimpse of the house in the rearview mirror. The harsh porch light, the stiff figure still visible through the front window, the heavy air of pride and bitterness hanging around them like smoke. I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel guilt. I felt free. And Mason, sitting in the back seat singing softly to himself as he played with his truck, was free too. Free from believing he had to twist himself into something he wasn't to be loved. Free from the cruel idea that toughness was better than tenderness. Free from the kind of love that had limits, rules, and cold, invisible walls. We pulled into the small ice cream shop downtown, the one with the twinkling fairy light strung across the windows. Mason chose chocolate chip cookie dough with rainbow sprinkles, and I picked mint chocolate chip like I always did. We sat on the curb outside, our legs swinging, sticky fingers holding melting cones. And for the first time in what felt like forever, there was no weight pressing down on us, only laughter, only lightness. Mason leaned against my shoulder, his voice muffled around a mouthful of ice cream. "I'm glad we left Mommy," he said. I kissed the top of his head, feeling tears prick the corners of my eyes. Not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude. "I'm glad too, baby," I whispered. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to fight harder to stay where you're not wanted. It's to walk away with your head high, your heart whole, and your hand firmly holding the one you love most. And sometimes the strongest stand you can make is simply refusing to stay small. That night wasn't just the end of one chapter, it was the beginning of another. One where Mason would always know he was enough. And as the stars glittered above us and the ice cream dripped down our wrists, I silently made a promise. No matter who tried to tell him otherwise, no matter how loud the world got, Mason would always have one voice, mine, reminding him that he was loved completely, unconditionally, forever. When we got home that night, Mason was half asleep in the back seat, the toy truck tucked under his arm like a favorite stuffed animal. His cheeks were still a little sticky from the ice cream, and his shoelaces trailed loose as he stumbled sleepily toward the front door. I watched him as he walked, small but steady, and something inside me shifted permanently. It would have been easy, so easy, to keep pretending, to keep swallowing the little cuts and the offhand cruelty just to keep the peace. To tell myself that Travis didn't really mean it or that Patricia's coldness was just old-fashioned tough love. But seeing Mason tonight, seeing his small voice rise up, seeing him stand against what wasn't right even when the room was against him, made it all so clear. The peace I was keeping. It wasn't peace at all. It was silence. And silence sometimes is the most dangerous betrayal. I tucked Mason into bed that night, pulling his blankets up to his chin. He was already drifting off, his breathing slow and even. But just before he slipped into sleep, he whispered, "I love you, Mom." Tears filled my eyes, but I kept my voice steady. "I love you too, Mason. Always." It wasn't just a bedtime ritual anymore. It was a promise, a shield, a truth he would never have to earn, no matter who tried to tell him otherwise. After I closed his door, I sat in the living room alone for a long time. The silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt peaceful. It felt like mine. I thought about the life ahead of us, the hard conversations that would come, the choices I would have to make. I knew Travis and his family would push back. I knew there would be anger, accusations, guilt thrown like stones in my direction. But for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt ready because protecting Mason's spirit, his kindness, his softness, his belief that love wasn't something you earned but something you deserved was more important than any uncomfortable family dinner or strained marriage. In the weeks that followed, I started making changes. Small at first, boundaries laid out clearly and firmly. No more unannounced visits from Patricia and Douglas. No more leaving Mason alone in situations where his heart might be bruised without anyone noticing. No more apologies for choosing his emotional safety over outdated ideas of toughness. And bigger changes too. Counseling appointments, hard conversations with Travis that ended with more silence than solutions, plans quietly forming in the background for a life where Mason and I could breathe freely every single day. Not just after escaping toxic evenings. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And it was real. Mason flourished in ways I hadn't even realized he was holding back before. He laughed louder. He asked more questions. He hugged tighter. He built pillow forts and sang in the shower and cried when he needed to without fear of being called weak. He became exactly what I had always hoped he would be, not tougher, not harder, just himself. And that was more than enough. One night, a few months later, Mason and I were making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in the kitchen when he looked up at me suddenly, grinning wide. "Mom," he said, "I'm really glad you're my mom." I blinked, caught off guard, my heart swelling so big it felt like it might burst. "I'm really glad too, buddy," I said, ruffling his hair. "You know you're pretty amazing just the way you are." He giggled and went back to smearing jelly with reckless abandon, completely at peace. And I realized that's all any child ever needs to hear. Not that they have to be stronger. Not that they have to be tougher. Not that love is a prize hanging over their heads waiting for them to earn it. Just that who they are, soft, messy, kind, and perfect, is already enough. Perfect. And if that made me too soft, if it made him too gentle for some people to understand, then we were proud to be soft. Proud to be gentle, proud to be exactly who we were. Because real strength isn't built by cruelty, it's built by love. And that was a lesson I would fight to teach Mason every single day for the rest of my life. There's something you learn the hard way when you choose to walk away from the people who try to tear you down. At first, it feels lonely, unsettling. You question yourself, wondering if maybe you were too sensitive, too protective, too much. But with time, with love, with healing, you realize something powerful. You were never too much. You were just too bright for people still trapped in their own darkness. And that's okay. Not everyone will understand the kind of love that doesn't come with conditions. Not everyone will appreciate the kind of strength that stands quietly without shouting or striking back. Not everyone will celebrate softness, gentleness, kindness. But those who matter will. Those who matter will see your heart, and they will protect it like it's something precious, not something that needs to be hardened or hidden. That's the future I chose for Mason, a future where his heart would be a strength, not a weakness, where he would know without question that he is worthy of love exactly as he is. No performance required, no tests to pass, no approval to beg for. And if there's something I want you to take away from our story today, it's this: you don't have to earn love. You were already born deserving it. If someone in your life makes you feel like you have to fight for their kindness, if they measure your worth in achievements, toughness, silence, if they make you feel small when you're just trying to be yourself, you don't have to stay at their table. You are allowed to stand up, take your love with you, and build a new table, one filled with warmth, compassion, and people who get it. It's not always easy. Sometimes it feels like walking through a storm without a map. But the peace waiting for you on the other side is bigger than you can imagine. It's laughter over melting ice cream. It's tiny hands holding onto yours without fear. It's quiet nights where love wraps around you like a warm, safe blanket. It's freedom, and it's yours if you're brave enough to choose it. As you know, if this story touched you, if it reminded you of your own strength or the battles you fought for your children, your younger self, or even your current self, please let me know. Hit the like button. It helps others who might need this reminder to find it too. Leave a comment. I would love to hear your story. Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic situation to protect your heart or your family? Have you ever been told you were too soft when really you were just strong in all the ways that matter? Share it with me. You are not alone here. This is a space for real stories, real hearts, real healing. This video is for someone who needs to hear it. You never know who might be struggling to believe that they are enough just as they are. And if you'd like to hear more real stories about love, resilience, and finding your own voice, subscribe to the channel and join this little community we're building. It's a place where softness is celebrated, kindness is strength, and no one has to earn their seat. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Thank you for listening to our story. Thank you for choosing love for yourself, for your family, for the world. And always remember, strength isn't about how hard you become, it's about how much you're willing to stay soft in a world that tries to harden you.